All right, so welcome back, everyone. Welcome to our new guests. Hopefully not guests, hopefully new members, new participants. Okay, so normally we do Tanya. We're going to continue with Tanya next week. But what I'm going to do with you today is the following. So I'll just explain so we get a bit of background and context. So this coming Shabbat, this is the 10th of Shvat, which is the yahrzeit. It's the day of passing of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 6th Rebbe. And it's also the day that his son-in-law, what we know as the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory, took over the leadership. This was in 1950. So in Hasidic tradition, we have something called a Maimer. A Maimer is Hasidic discourse. The Tanya is the foundation of all Chabad Hasidic philosophy. And then following on from that, we have different discourses and research and essays and different things. Before the previous Rebbe passed away, he asked his son-in-law, the Rebbe, to publish a Maimer, famously known as Bossi Legani, which we'll explain what that means in a minute. And that was done in 4 parts. You know, he obviously foresaw that he was going to, that 10th of Shvat would be there were many signs actually that he knew that he was going to pass away. But he asked him to publish a Maimer of 20 chapters, which he divided into 4 different sections, each in honor of a different upcoming day. So the first one was in honor of the 10th of Shvat, which, besides being a day that he passed away, was also the yahrzeit of his grandmother, Rebbe Rivka. The second one was in honor of the 13th of Shvat, which was the yahrzeit of his mother. Then the third one was for Purim, and the fourth one was for the 2nd of Nisan, which was his father's yahrzeit. And then that was published on the Friday. It's interesting, this year the 10th of Shvat is on a Shabbos. When he passed away, it was also on a Shabbos. And it was printed on Friday, and the Rebbe brought it to him on the Friday. And he was very happy, and the next morning he passed away. And the Rebbe took it as the last Maimer that the previous Rebbe published, that it was kind of his mission statement, so to speak, and his last Maimer that he gave out. The teachings were very important, and therefore encouraged people to learn this, particularly on the day of 10th of Shvat and so on. Now, what used to happen is that a year later, the Rebbe formally accepted the leadership of the Chabad movement, and one of the sort of hallmarks or the defining things that he did to accept the leadership was because Rebbe say a Maimer. So he also said a Maimer on the first Yud Shvat, and he said the famous also Bossi Legani. What he would do is, since then, every year he would say a Maimer beginning with the same verse, and in that Maimer he would explain a different chapter of the previous Rebbe's Maimer, right, in depth. So he did this for almost 2 cycles. In other words, the full cycle till the 20th, and then again till like the 17th one or something. Now, Maimer traditionally always starts with like a pasuk, a sort of a verse or a saying from the Talmud or whatever the case is. It's many, many different topics. What I'm going to do today is I took the previous Rebbe's Maimer, different parts from different chapters, and just took excerpts. So I'll give you a bit of because we're not going to take us a long time to learn all 20 chapters, and especially with the Rebbe's explanations and so on. So I just took, so we get a bit of a flavor for it in preparation for Yud Shvat, and we'll try and see. And also, I'll give you a little bit of an insight about what this year's, because even since the Rebbe passed away, every year we try to learn the Rebbe's explanation of that particular year. This year is very complicated, very deep, and very, very mystical and Kabbalistic. But I'll give you a little bit of insight into it as we come to the end, hopefully. Just before we start, I'll tell you an interesting thing. I mentioned that the previous Rebbe passed away on a Shabbos that year. This year's also. I know my accent doesn't give it away, but I grew up in South Africa. I was born and grew up in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And my grandfather was Rabbi Eloy. If anyone knows the name, Rabbi Eloy, he was the Rabbi of Berea Shul. And he actually had quite a connection with the previous Rebbe and with the Rebbe. And I have the copy actually. I have the copy of. He got many letters from the previous Rebbe. In 1950, just before Yud Shvat, he sent a letter to the previous Rebbe to ask him something about changing careers or changing positions. I don't know exactly what it was. And the previous Rebbe wanted to answer him very urgently. So he did two things. He sent him a telegram. Not telegram, remember telegrams? He sent him a telegram that he should not change, and he also followed it up with a letter, a short letter. But the letter was written on the Friday, the 9th of Shvat. One of the last of that year. One of the last letters that the previous Rebbe wrote. He gave it to he told his secretary he dictated the letter. His secretary prepared the letter, and he was planning to go in on Sunday to get the previous Rebbe's signature. And of course, never happened. So he sent the letter and he put that extra PS, like, I prepared this letter, I was going to go and get it signed on Sunday. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, and he signed his name. The way he signs, he has Achoisim Bedema. I sign with tears, and he sent off the letters back. So it's one of the last letters the previous Rebbe wrote, which I have a copy of at home, and it was that letter that he should stay where he is, and whatever the case. It's just interesting, fun fact. Okay.
Very special.
Yeah, it is special, yeah. Also, another interesting thing I mentioned before, I'll just actually mention this, because I could see it. I mean, it's a famous thing, but I could see it from many of the letters that my grandfather got with the previous Rebbe's signature. From the previous year, Yud Shvat, from the 10th of Shvat, the previous year, 1949, no one knew why, but the previous Rebbe changed his signature a little bit. He modified it. He would always sign his name Yosef Yitzchak, which was his name, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Shneisen. He would sign his first two names, Yosef Yitzchak, which both names begin with the Yud, right? From Yud Shvat, from the 10th of Shvat the year before, he started signing his letters, and the second Yud, he made it a thick Yud, like in the Torah. Not a cursive Yud, but he changed it to make it like a very big Yud, the way it's done in a Torah scroll. No one knew why. And one says afterwards it was obviously a hint to the Yud, the 10th of Shvat, which would be the previous year. And fascinating thing. Anyway, but you see it, and it becomes more accentuated as the year goes by. It's like it started off a little bit big, and then it became bigger and bigger, which is interesting. Okay, let's try and learn. So I've numbered the different paragraphs that I've taken out of the Maimer, and we'll see. So the whole Maimer is based on a verse, a pasuk. It says, "Basi legani achoisi kala." This pasuk, this verse comes from Song of the Songs that was authored by King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, and Shlomo Melech talks on behalf of the Shir Hashirim. Just for those that don't know, is the love story between God and the Jewish people. It's like a bride and a groom, and it's very cryptic book of Tanakh.
Yeah,
Have you studied it?
I did 88 days of reading it.
Oh wow!
Just finished, and it was like I finally got some of it by the end.
Yeah, no, it's one of these things you can't know without commentary. You actually have to study with commentary.
Yeah.
And also different commentaries will give you different versions, but essentially because you never know who's speaking. Sometimes it's God speaking, sometimes it's the Jewish people speaking. Anyway, one of the verses is God speaking, and he's talking about the time that he came to give the Jewish people the Torah on Mount Sinai. And he says, Basi Legani, I came to my garden, my sister, my bride. That's what he says, right? So it says the previous Rebbe. So the Medrash Rabbi says, the Medrash points out, Legan ein ksiv kan ela legani lignuni. It's interesting. Hashem refers to the world as a garden. He arrived at his garden, but he doesn't say, I came to the garden. He says, I came to my garden. What does that mean? Lignuni, it means the makim shahoye ikri betchil. Now, we need to understand, what does it mean Hashem came? Hashem is everywhere anyways. He created the world. The world is filled with his existence, but it means in a revealed way. In other words, Hashem came, he revealed himself. There was a godly consciousness. He revealed himself when he gave the Torah Mount Sinai. There was a godly revelation. But God said this is not the first time. So I've come already. This is my garden originally. I came to my garden. Lignuni, to my parlor, to my palace, right? Meaning, L'mokim shoy ikri batchilo, says the Medrash, to the place where my main presence was there before. Why? Because we know that when Hashem created the world, the ikra shchina b'tachtonim hoisa, the main presence of Hashem was actually down here in this world. There are many worlds. Kabbalah talks about 4 different worlds, many worlds, transcendent worlds, all kinds of things, but the main presence of Hashem is actually this world, because this is the purpose of creation. However, says the Maimer, but when the first sin happened, when Adam and Eve sinned with the first sin, the divine presence departed from the world in a revealed way, in a revealed state, and went to the 7 heavens, went to the first of the 7 heavens, or the bottom heaven, right? And through the sin of other sins, Kayin, Enosh, and so on, the Shekhinah went to the 2nd heaven, to the 3rd heaven. And then the flood went even further. Nistalka Gimel Dalet. Uge the Issa Medrash Rabbi, like the Medrash Rabbi says, al pasuk on the pasuk by Yishmas Koil Hashem Elokim Yisalech Bagan, when it says when after the Adam sinned, it says Adam heard the voice of Hashem jumping, sort of walking, jumping in the garden. Omer Rab Abba tells us, Mahalech ein ksiv kan, elo mishalech, kopitz ve'ozil. Doesn't say the divine presence was traveling, it says it was like jumping. In other words, it was departing more and more further away from the world. Then what happened was, until it went to the seventh heavens, furthest away from the world you could happen. I'm just going a bit fast because I want to get to sort of some paragraphs when I'm going to dwell on it more. Then seven tzaddikim came and brought the divine presence down here to this world. Right? Avram Avinu, the father of the Jewish nation, he was successful in bringing the divine presence from the seventh top heaven down to the sixth. Yitzchak Mavav Lehei, Yitzchak from the sixth to the fifth, and so on. There were seven tzaddikim. Ad ki Moshe, until it came to Moshe. Shua Shvi, he was the seventh one of those seven tzaddikim that Kabbalah talks about and the Midrashim talk about. V'chol ha'shvin chavivin, and he puts in the previous Rebbe adds in parentheses here a phrase from a different Midrash that all sevenths are precious. There's a famous tradition that Hasidim have that this was a hint to Yud Shvat, the 10th of Shvat, because in the Chabad Rebbe's, the first was the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, and then the previous Rebbe was the 6th, and then the Rebbe took over on also on Yud Shvat, he was the 7th Rebbe, which the Rebbe made reference to afterwards. He called us the 7th generation, and the 7th generation's job, as the Rebbe explains later, I'll talk about it later, is to finalize the bringing the Shekhinah down to this world and to bring Mashiach, right? So the Moshe Rabbeinu was the 7th, and all 7ths are precious. Hayridu lemata ba'aretz, he brought the Shekhinah down to this world, right? With the giving of the Torah. So the giving of the Torah finalized the Shekhinah, the divine presence coming back to this world. Unfortunately, it got messed up again afterwards with the golden calf. That's why we're still busy bringing it down again, right? But, okay, but it's different. It's not for now, but it's a different process, but nevertheless the same thing. Now, this happened at the giving of the Torah, but he adds, the Iker Gilui Alakus Hayib Beis Hamikdash. The main revelation of godliness when the Jews were in the desert wasn't so much even the giving of the Torah. The main revelation in the physical world of the divine presence was when they built the Mishkan. They built the sanctuary to Hashem, the tabernacle, the Mishkan in the desert. As it says, the pasuk says, Dichsiv, Asu li migdash v'shachanti b'soichem. Hashem, when he instructed Moshe Rabbeinu to make a Mishkan, he said, make for me a Migdash and I will dwell among them. As we know, the famous idea. It doesn't say I will dwell in it, it says I will dwell in them. Amongst each and every person. In other words, what we're going to see in a second is this idea that every person is a Mishkan. And of course, there's Moshe Rabbeinu who leads the charge. But then every person has to become a receptacle and has to come in his own sanctuary to bring Hashem, to bring God into his or her personal dwelling place and environment, and that fulfills the purpose of creation, right? That's the thing. Okay, now, again, I'm skipping. These are different paragraphs, but I just want to give you sort of a picture. So number 2, he says like this. This is all the previous Rebbe's Maimer. So this is what it means then, that Hashem said, I came to my garden, meaning I came to a place that was already a garden. By the way, one of the Yud Shvats, every Yud Shvat, the Rebbe used to have a very big Farbrengen. One of them, he said a very famous Sikha, we mentioned it last week, but about why the world is called a garden. In other words, the point here is a different point. The point is that Hashem said, I came to my dwelling place, meaning it's not new, I came to where it was already. Okay? In other words, when the world was created, Hashem's presence was in this world and it departed because of the sins. And therefore, in Matan Torah, Hashem said, I came to my garden, meaning I came to my original garden. I came to where I was. I came home, in other words. This is not foreign to me. I came home, right? It's not a new thing. But what doesn't dwell on, what this Bible doesn't dwell on, is why is it called a garden? Right? And then we have a whole sikh, a very famous talk where he says there's 2 ways to look at the world. You could look at the world as a jungle, which is not hard to look at the world that way, especially nowadays. But the pasuk is telling us you really have to know that actually it's not a jungle, it's God's garden. In other words, if you dig deeper and you reveal what's really hidden in the world, you discover the garden. That's one idea. And the other idea is that he said a garden is a place where you plant. And when you plant, no one plants something to grow the same thing, right? For example, the Gemara says you don't you don't plant 10 seeds of wheat kernels in order to grow 10 seeds of wheat, right? You grow something to produce much more. And that's what we have to understand, that we're working in Hashem's garden, and our job is to plant and invest. And the invest has to bring dividends that are far greater than what we planted. That's the concept. Okay. He says like this. We in paragraph 2, the second line, last word. He says like this. Let's break this down. What's the concept here? The hine. What is the purpose of creation? So we're going to learn something now that we've talked about many times, because this is fundamental to Chassidus, and Chabad Chassidus particularly. Because the Alter Rebbe made this a very big focus, based on a medrash. The Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu liyos lo yisborech dira b'tachtonim. Hashem wanted a dwelling place in this world. Shehiyeh gilui l'kus lemata al yedei avodas sa'adam. That there should be the revelation of godliness down here, and it should happen through the work of the human being. Now let's just break this down a little bit, okay? What does this mean? So first, like this. There's a famous question in Kabbalah, what is the purpose of creation? Okay, I guess everyone asks that question, right? What's the purpose of existence? And there are various different, in Zohar and in Arizal, there are different sort of expressions that are used to explain. One says Hashem he wanted to do chesed, Hashem wanted to do kindness, he created a world where he can give kindness, he wanted his greatness to be known, whatever. We don't understand Hashem's working, but these are different things, right? And Chassidus goes through the whole thing, and particularly in the first Maimer that the Rebbe said, 1951, he went into this in great depth, that ultimately some of these reasons explain existence, but they don't explain the existence of this world. What does that mean? Because we are not the only world, right? We know that in Kabbalah we talk about many worlds. We're not going to go through all that. We've done this before, but we're not going to, first of all, there's his world, called the world of Atzilus. Then there's the 3 worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, but they're all spiritual worlds, right? So each one is greater than the other. Each world comes down lower than the other. Each world is governed by the 10 spheres, Chacham and Adas, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, and so on, right? But there are creations that exist in the spiritual worlds. There are angels, there are spheres, right? These are all things that create. There might not be existences or creations the way we understand creation, meaning tangible and take up time and space, but that's because that's our frame of reference, so we don't understand anything else. So to us, only like a table exists because I can touch it, it's got dimensions and it takes up space, and there's a time when it was built and a time when it was destroyed or whatever, right? But we know that's not the only form of existence, right? And we've talked about this many times. It's a big mistake people make to think that we are physical and God is spiritual. God is not spiritual, nor is he physical. God is God. It's undefined, right? Spirituality is a form of existence. It's maybe more conducive to feeling godliness, that could be, but it's a creation like any other creation, right? Even the world of Atzilus, which is Hashem's world, has spheres which are limited beings, right? It's not Hashem. Hashem transcends all the spheres. Hashem manifested himself in 10 spheres. We've explained this at length when we learned Tanya. Okay. But all the other things that we learn, that Hashem wanted to reveal his kindness, he wanted to give kindness, he wanted to reveal himself, whatever the case is, that could all take place in the higher worlds, right? You don't need this world for that. You know what I'm saying? Those purposes could be fulfilled in a much higher form of existence. The world of Atzilus, the world of Bria, whatever, right? Question: why did Hashem create this world? What is the definition of this world? This world is called, in Tanya refers to it like that, Tachton she'ein tachton lemata himen. It's called the lowest world, that there's nothing lower. Now what does that mean? We don't mean in physical terms. It's not It's not ground floor of a big skyscraper. Right? That's not what we mean. Lower in the forms of godly consciousness and godly revelation. Right? This is a world where God created like created all the other worlds. But it's a world where He's totally concealed. Not only is totally concealed, but you're going to have a situation where the existence of Hashem is denied in this world. Right? Take the higher worlds, even the world of Yitzir or Asir. Those worlds we are taught are, like even the angels, okay, one's lower than the next, but even in the lowest form of spiritual worlds, there's no denying of Hashem's existence. There's bittul, the country. They feel themselves completely dependent on Hashem. They might, as you go lower and lower down in the various worlds, there might be a situation where they still feel themselves as a separate entity to God. That could be, but their own God is still revealed, right? This is the only world which is physical, not just physical. It's physical to the point that God's existence is totally concealed and sometimes even denied. Like we just came from the parasha, last couple of parashas of the week, where Paroi said, "Li yo'or v'ani asasini," the river belongs to me and I made it. But the height of God's denying the existence of God, and particularly the fact that God is the source of all creation and everything that happens in this world, right? Okay. Why did Hashem create this world? Because this is where He wanted to live. Why did He want to live here? We don't know. The term in the Medrash and as brought in Chassidus is that Nis'ave HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem He desired to live here. And the Alter Rebbe famously said, "Afatayve frekmenish kenkashis." You can't ask a question on a desire. People are born with desires. Even human beings are born with innate desires, right? Example of that is there's a intrinsic innate desire of every human being to have a home. Right? Not just about shelter, it's about having a home. Okay, sometimes we have desires that can't be explained. That's because they don't transcend logic, they're lower than logic. That's in human beings. But in the Hashem's case, I'll give you a little bit of an analogy for it where, again, it's not like you can have like Chassidus says that desires are the strongest part of the strongest force within a human being, right? That's because we emulate Hashem, and Hashem also is the deepest thing. But with human beings, most of our desires are linked to some logical explanation. Like I might want something really, really well, but I could, unless it's something stupid, I could explain it, right? Even if I explain it irrationally, if I explain it distortedly, or whatever the case is. I'll give you an analogy where you see a desire that can't be explained. It's like just a desire. Sometimes if you have a child playing with a toy, right? And I don't know, his brother wants to take it away from him. He took away something. And the parent says, I'll give you the other toy. He says, no, I want the red toy. I don't want to play with the green toy, I want the red toy. And it's like full force. He's going to give a tantrum until he gets the red toy. Right? It's like it has no explanation. I mean, the child doesn't have even the capacity to explain anything. A child's intellect, cognitive ability is underdeveloped at 2 years old or 3 years old. Right? It's a want. In other words, just an analogy that a want doesn't have to be connected necessarily to an explanation, right? But with Hashem, it's the other way around. Hashem means He's one because it's deep. It's who Hashem is. This is what He wants. Like we have a similar thing by the mitzvahs, for example. That Hashem gave us mitzvahs to do. Some of them, they don't have a reason. And Chassidus explains that some of them, not only we don't know the reason, there isn't a reason. He wants. Means an expression of Him. That's what it means. So an expression of Hashem is, whatever that means, that He wanted, He desired. He wanted to live in the world that there's nothing lower. That's where He wanted to live. However, this is fundamental to the Maimer, and the Rebbe talks about in other Maimerim. Fundamental to this concept is the following. There's two ways that Hashem could live in this world, right? Now, sorry, before I say that. And how do we, so we invite Him to live here. We do mitzvahs, we do godly things, and so on and so forth. Not always do we see how Hashem is now descending into this world to kind of feel comfortable here, but it's all working towards the ultimate goal, which is Mashiach, which is the time where Hashem's presence will be fully revealed in the world, and then we'll see the fruits of our labor. We'll see how all the mitzvahs that we did and everything we did was actually inviting Hashem to live here, and then the ultimate purpose of creation will be fulfilled at its highest level. However, this goal of Hashem living in this world When you say living, it's not just being present, it's actually being felt in this world, being revealed in this world, right? That there's a godly consciousness in the world, right? That can happen in two ways. It can happen in two ways. Hashem can create a world where he's totally hidden, and if he desires to live here, he can move in. I mean, who's stopping him? Right? In other words, without us making it happen, he can. If he desired to live here, he can move in. He can reveal himself. Right? In fact, that's kind of what he did right in the beginning. It says that's what we learned in the beginning, that Hashem said, "I'm coming back to my garden because this is where I was in the beginning." So he could create a world moving. Right? So the previous Rebbe always, when he talks about this, and he says it many places in different words, but this is the point. That wasn't Hashem's desire. Hashem was, the way the wording in Chassidus is like this. Hashem wanted a dira b'tachtoinim al yedei avodas hatachtoinim. He wanted a dwelling place down here to be created, right, in the lowest form of existence, to be created. He wanted to be invited by the people of the lowest existence. So. Hi. If you go around, look to the back, and just you'll see there's a back entrance. Just ring the bell. Sorry. Okay, so that's the point. Hashem wanted a dwelling place down here, made by the people down here, made by the people who also are part of the darkness of this world. Yeah, is that clear? Therefore, what did he do? He created us. He gave us the tool. He gave us. Now, this is Tanya, we've been learning all the time, right? He gave us the nefesh elokis, the godly soul, but he also gave us the nefesh habam. It's an animal soul, and the animal soul is the worldliness that we have. Now, without a godly soul, we wouldn't be able to make the dwelling place for Hashem, because we have to have that godly spark. But the godly soul is somewhat hidden within us, and we have to reveal it. But the animal soul is the part of us that's the tachtoinim. That's the part of us that's part of this problem, part of this darkness, part of this concealment of Hashem, right? What we call klippa, right? Klippa means something that conceals Hashem. An animal soul drives us to be fully immersed in materialism, drives us to be fully immersed in this world, to pursue pleasure, to pursue self-centeredness, and to pursue anything that's materialistic and hedonistic and so on and so forth. The animal soul is not quite, in its natural state, is not interested in a higher purpose. It's impulsive and egocentric, just like an animal is, right? And that's the part of us that we use to make a dira b'tachtoin, to make a dwelling place for Hashem. How do we do that? He says, let's look again, the third line of section 2. Hashem desired to have a dwelling place down here in this world. There should be a divine revelation down here. Al yedei avodas adam, which has to come through the service, the investment of the human being. Al yedei, through two things. This is the theme that goes throughout. Iskafia v'ishapcha. Iskafia means subjugation, ishapcha means transformation. Meaning, either we're going to just put the animal soul in its place and force ourselves to serve Hashem. Obviously, the idea is we don't stay right. And then ultimately, ishapcha, transformation. Now, transformation is a very, very big, high level. Most people don't reach ishapcha in its fullest sense, at least. Meaning only great tzaddikim are able to transform their animal soul completely, that they don't even have the foreign desires anymore, right? But as we've been learning in Tanya, for most people, which is the book of Tanya, the book of the BINA, the BINA has the struggle. We always have the struggle. We've always got temptations. We've always got temptations to indulge into the wrong thing and to become angry and to have bad character traits and to do spiritually the wrong thing, etc., etc. And we have control. We have the power of choice. That's iskafia. Iskafia means to subjugate, right? The Rabbi explains many places, and of course, ishapcha is something achievable in certain moments. We can have what's called ishapcha moments, right? Where we develop a kind of, because the dial of iskafia moves, right? In other words, sometimes we start doing a mitzvah, we start doing something, and we do it so much that we come used to it, so we start enjoying it. Okay, that's good. But that doesn't mean it's over. It means there's other things to worry about, right? So the challenges, the goalpost moves with the challenge. Okay. But essentially, it's that concept. The neshama tered lemata lislabish beguf nefesh habamis. That the neshama should come down to come into the body and the animal soul. V'hem yalimu v'yastir neshama. And the whole idea is that the animal soul should block the godly soul, should block the godliness within the person. Ubechol zen, and nevertheless, tifol haneshama bir v'zichu chaguf nefesh habamis. A person will be able to achieve the refinement, the spiritualization of his body and his animal soul, and also his environment that he's been granted. Because we learn in Chassidus, every person is given a nefesh habamis, animal soul to work with, and also every person has been given a piece of the world to change.
So, when we conquer our nefesh habamis, our neshama descends into our body?
No, the neshama is more revealed in your body. Neshama is in your body already. But like we learned in Tanya, everyone even has, okay, some of it's more internal, some of it's more hovering, but we all have a neshama.
I thought it was made in hovering.
Part of the neshama, sorry.
So when we create the deal that's our Tanya, the neshama...
Well, we connect, I wouldn't say it comes into us, but we connect to. You can't close it completely because there's this fault with the air conditioning.
I can open it.
Oh, unless you open a window, you can open a window in the door. Right?
I just thought for noise. Shall I leave it open?
Oh, you can close now. I think so. You can close it, see what happens. That's what I
see.
Oh, that's good now, that's good. I know there's an engineering fault, yeah, that it's okay, it's good.
Which noise do you
That's right. Okay. No, so okay, that's a whole other discussion, but the point is that the more you refine your nefesh habamis, the more access you have, whether in a way of hovering or makif or pnimi, that's not for now, but you access there for the depth of your neshama. We'll talk about it a bit later, because No, the reason that we can fight the war is because we have, might not be internalized, but we have to, like we learn in Tanya, we have to access that chokhmah, the hidden love, the hidden mysterious nefesh that we have here. So, so now like this. Now he explains over there, I'm giving a bit of an overview. So now, so this is the point of creation. Not just our nefesh habamis, it's not just our animal soul, but everywhere we are. That's why we say, the pasuk says, wherever a person lands up, that's where he's supposed to be. Wherever we land up, like if we come to a destination, we didn't think we were supposed to go there, there's a purpose. That means we have a purpose there, and we have a part of that existence that we have to elevate. It could be through learning something, it could be through saying a prayer, it could be through helping someone. Whatever case, there's a mitzvah to do there because, right? We never land, this is an important concept, by the way. We never land up anywhere we're not meant to be. Even if it's a mistake. Right? And this, I was reminded of this. I took back in July, we took a trip and we're coming back. I was traveling with my son-in-law. It was a big balagan. The plane didn't leave left late anyway, bottom line is we just made the plane in California. We got onto the plane, it sat on the runway, and there was some air conditioning fault. They got someone to fix it. By the time they came to fix it, the crew's time timed out. Some law that they can only go for a certain amount of time. Anyway, it was like, by the time it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning in California, they booked us on a flight going through Japan, which means that was the whole flight, like a whole different direction. There was no flight, so we booked it. And these things naturally are always very annoying, like what I'm saying. So I was thinking to myself, like I was trying to calm myself down. Remember, this is what it says in Chassidus. Okay, obviously we're meant to go to Japan. I still don't know why, by the way. I do know this. When I came to Japan, I was thinking about this. So what am I going to do in Japan, like to elevate Japan, right? I ever told this story? So I found one guy. He looked Jewish. Anyway, it turns out he's Muslim. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So that wasn't very successful. I was going to talk to him, tell him a word, tell him about Torah, I don't know. So I figured, okay, it's probably no one else looked Jewish there. So that I could talk to, that I could maybe teach, I could inspire, no one. So I had my thing. So I sat down in the airport and I learned something. I wasn't really in the mood. I was very, very tired. But I said, maybe that's why I came to Japan. Maybe someone had to learn some Torah at this point in Japan's airport to elevate Yeah, but it's an interesting perspective. I'm saying I'm not always successful at this. As I always tell you, I will only tell you the stories that work. But
Maybe just being there was enough.
I don't know. That's
Energetically.
yeah. Chassidus doesn't really subscribe to that too much, to be honest with you. Yiddishkeit is a religion of doing. There's always something to do. There is times where being is a good state of being as a means to an end, but that you can do anywhere. It doesn't have to be Japan, right? So I would submit that if you land up somewhere, it's about doing something, and not just being there. Yeah, it's a different discussion, but
No, it's just made me think of something. So.
But I mean, it could be. Maybe it's good to have some good thoughts there. I don't know, whatever. But that's the point, because the point is what he's saying. The purpose of creation is dira b'tachtonin, a dwelling place down here, and therefore we're each given an animal soul to work with. Every animal is different, by the way, and we're given a piece of the world or pieces of the world that we have to elevate. And he says this is the model for this is the Mishkan. The Mishkan. I'm going to skip some of the inside because we're not going to manage. I want to get to actually what more to do with this year's chapter. Right? The model of this is the Mishkan. We are our own Mishkan. So what? And then he goes on a whole tangent and explains, when there was a temple or a Mishkan, what was one of the most important rituals in the Mishkan? It was the bringing of sacrifices. Right? I know sacrifice is a difficult topic, complex topic, but that was the fact. The fact is that it was tablet. What was the idea of sacrifices? So sacrifices was an animal that you took and it went on the altar, right? But part of each sacrifice was to sprinkle the blood on the altar, and then either parts of the animal, the whole animal went on the altar, sacrificed to Hashem. Now, in Hebrew, the word sacrifice is called korban, right? Korban. The word korban, we always translate as sacrifice, but actually what does it mean? Kiruv, which means to come close, right? The bringing of sacrifices in the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash was the model for our own personal sacrifice. What is that? That we have to take our own animal and bring it to a sacrifice. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? It means, first of all, there's a concept of sprinkling the blood, right? Sprinkling the blood. What is blood? Blood represents the passion. There's a pasuk that says, "Ki hadam hu hanefesh." The soul is in the blood of the person, right? The blood represents the vitality, the passion, the excitement of a person. That's what blood is your blood boils, right? That's the expression. Because that's where our energy is, right? The problem with our animal soul is not the animal soul itself. It's the direction that the animal self is taking. It's the passion, it's the excitement, it's the pursuits, right? So in the Mishkan, the animal actually was elevated. The animal was able to go on the Mizbech. So should our animal. We were able to channel and to guide the Nefesh Abamis, the animal soul, to direct it towards having its desires and its passions and its excitement towards something which is more purposeful and meaningful and godly. What's step one? How do you do that? You have to sprinkle the blood on the Mizbech. You have to take the blood which represents the coarse and animalistic passions of the animal and redirect it towards the Mizbech, which is the altar of God. And that's why we look to that Mizbech as a sort of a model to understanding what does it mean to work with our animal soul. And to develop and excite. He says, people sometimes, they follow the pursuit of all sorts of sort of lowly and animalistic and materialistic and hedonistic pursuits. Our first stage is to redirect that and to sort of develop an excitement of something godly. Now, we're not going to be angels. We're not supposed to be angels. We're human beings. We'll still have, we'll still want a good steak or a good ice cream, whatever the case is. But at least what we can do in a general way, we can sort of start the process by redirecting our passion, our excitement, into having excitement in something that's more deep, that's something higher, that's something more transcendent, right? And then, of course, we have to apply it, and that's through Torah, through mitzvahs, and so on and so forth. Now, so that's why the Mishkan was like the model of this idea of us, each one being our own Mishkan, and making for Hashem a dira b'tachtoin, right? How do we do that? So he goes back to the Mishkan and he says the following. Just have a look at number 4, just to one or two lines here. It says, with this we can understand, if we take this principle that the building of the Mishkan in the desert was the model and the formula for us making a dwelling place for Hashem, then every detail of the Mishkan is all part of that formula, right? One of the details of the Mishkan is that the beams which were the structure of the Mishkan was atzei shittim. It was the acacia wood, they call it. But it's called, in Hebrew it's called atzei shittim. Right? What's the shittim wood? So shittim has a number of different meanings. First of all, comes to the word shtus. Shtus means foolishness. Right? Why does it come from the word foolishness? Because in spiritual terms, foolishness also means, the Gemara says, Ein Adam choyte elim ke nichnas boi ruach shtus. A person doesn't sin unless a spirit of foolishness enters him. Why? As he explains at length in the Maimer, the default of a Yid is the desire to connect to Hashem. That's our default. Deep down, our godly neshama, that's what we want to do. It's the animal soul that, as we say in Yiddish, vadreza sakop. In other words, that conceals us and it makes us sway, right? So the word shtus also comes from to deviate in Hebrew. Siste, like in the Chumash, there's a mitzvah of soita, the adulterous woman. It says siste ishtay. She went away. She went astray, right? Going off the path, so to speak, right? And off the path is really a shtus. It's a foolishness. So the Mishkan was made out of atzei shittim, out of acacia wood, the wood called shittim, right? Why? Because our job, part of the job of dira b'tachtonim, is to transform the foolishness of this world. All the delights, all the attractions, all the things in this world that is luring us away from a godly connection is shtus. It's nonsense. We don't always think of it like that, but that's what it is. It's empty. And our job is to change that shtus into holiness. How do we do it? So a very big part of the 20 chapters of the previous Rebbe's Maimer, he says, you can only fight shtus with shtus. And he says a very amazing thing. We've talked about this before, but I'll just briefly go through it again. There's foolishness which is lower than logic, and then there's foolishness which is higher than logic. Foolishness is not always a bad thing. Right? Foolishness that's higher than logic means something you do which doesn't make sense, but it doesn't make sense because it's coming from a conviction or a value which is so ingrained and so embedded in who you are that you do it anyway. It doesn't make sense. I mean, a quick example of this, not such a practical example because we don't live in that kind of era, but an example would be the Jews that risk their lives to do a mitzvah in the times of communism or the Holocaust, or right, and throughout history, and even gave up their lives sometimes just to, right, they did things which were crazy and didn't make any sense, which were dangerous. Why? Because they just couldn't bear to go against Hashem, right? That's what we call shtus tikdusha. But there's shtus tikdusha today too. It's about doing things that on the surface don't seem to make sense. Sometimes we think we can't do certain things. Sometimes we think we can't, it's too much, it's too busy, I'm too this, that, the other. And we transcend the logic. Because he says in the Maimer, the only real way to fight the war of transforming the shtus, the foolishness of this world, is to do it with foolishness of holiness. If you serve Hashem only very rationally, it's not a weapon to fight the foolishness of the world. You have to understand. I'll tell you a quick story, because I've told the story before, just to bring this out. The town my grandfather came from in White Russia was called Dokshitz. It was a Hasidic town, and there was a very big Chassid. His name was Rabbi Yochanan Gordon. Anyway, he left. Yochanan Gordon left before the war. My grandfather also left before the war. Yochanan Gordon went to America. My grandfather went to South Africa. But when the Germans came, it was a terrible thing. The Germans came and rounded up everyone in the town, and they put them into the shul, and they were going to burn the shul down. And that's what they did. Most people died that way. The rabbi of the town was a very, very great Hasidic Jew. His name was Rabbi Leib Sheinin. He was a Yid that used to daven very strongly every day, and it was just a Yid that really lived by Tanya, like all the things we learned in Tanya. Okay. So when they came to the shul, they rounded up all the Yid in the shul. Rabbi Leib Sheinin was actually oblivious because he was actually in the shul already from the morning still because he was davening. He took a few hours to daven every day. He would daven very intensely. He was davening, he was completely lost in his prayer, and then he looked up and he saw what's happening. He realizes this is the end. So he got up and he spoke to the people and he says, Yidden, we're about to give up our life to sanctify Hashem's name. It's not a time to be down, it's a time to be joyous. And he started to dance and sing a niggin. Right? And the Germans shot him. Anyway, how do we know the story? Because there was one Jew there, he wasn't so involved, but he was in the town. That, I don't know, he had to go to the bathroom or something, so he jumped out of a window and somehow he managed to actually escape. And eventually he made it to America. He went to visit Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, who was so happy to see him, and he was in his mind. Rabbi Yochanan Gordon he says, please tell me, what was the last moments like with Rabbi, my rabbi, right? So he told him the story. Told him the story exactly what happened. Then he says to Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, he says, and he was a bit cynical, this guy, so he says, he says in Yiddish, he says, I think that in the last moments, and he used the Yiddish expression for someone that's crazy, in the last moments, the rabbi went a Rop von Sinnen. A Rop von Sinnen means you go crazy, but the literal translation means you go down from your mind. Like you have a mind, you think normally, and when a person is going crazy, you say, is a Rop von Sinnen. This is the expression in Yiddish. You want to talk Yiddish, anyone? No? A little bit?
I just remember it from my dad.
Okay, so Rop von Sinnen means go down from your mind. That's what he said to Rabbi Yochanan. He said, I think the Rav, in Dakshish, in the last moments, he went down from his mind. So Rabbi Yochanan Gordon turned to him and he said, my child, he says, nicht a Rop von Sinnen, a Ruf von Sinnen. He didn't go down from his mind, he went higher than his mind. The emunah, the faith, which is irrational, that every Yid has, came out strongly, and he went higher than his mind, not lower than his mind. Because this concept is a very important concept, because it leads into the next part of the Maimer, which is also relating to this world. See, the Rebbe said this whole Maimer is about us. The Rebbe, when he took on the leadership, he said, we are the seventh generation, we've got to finish the war, we've got to bring Mashiach. And it's a tough struggle, it is a war, right? So he says in the previous Rebbe, and the Rebbe talks about it a lot, he says that's why he goes into the whole concept, why in this week's Parasha, which happens to be the same as Yud Shvat, and last week's Parasha, the Yidden have a name, they're called Tzivois Hashem, the army of God, right? We are called an army, why? Because we actually have to finish a very important war, it's a struggle. We're an army. We're fighting a war against evil, the war against darkness, the war against materialism, spiritually, physically, whatever the case is, right? And he says like this, that when you fight a war, he goes into a whole section of the Maimer where he talks about Netzach. Now, I'll very quickly explain because we're gonna run out of time. So we know that there's different ways of functioning. We have 7 in the spheres, right? Which also reflect in the 10 powers of the soul. We've got 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. The 7 emotional divided into 2, the 6 and the 1. Right, etc. But Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, those are the 3 primary emotions that we have. That's how we function. We develop love, we develop discipline, fear, respect, and harmony, beauty, and so on. And then we have the 3 supporting ones, which are called Netzach, Hoid, and Yesod. Netzach, Hoid, and Yesod. Netzach is ambition, victory, Hoid is humility, and then Yesod, which is connection. And then we have Malchus, which is like communication and implementation. Okay. Netzach, what is Netzach? Something like Chesed. Netzach means victory, right? Determination, ambition. So in the hierarchy of the spheres, right? In the hierarchy of the spheres, Chesed and Gvura Tiferes are higher. Like if I have a love for something, that's better. How about if I don't have a love for something, but I do it because I'm determined to do it? So on one level, that's lower. But Chassidus explains it's actually not like that. Although in the hierarchy of the way the emotions work, Netzach is lower than Chesed, but it's rooted much more deeper in the soul. The idea of winning, determination to win, has a very deep root and origin deep in the soul. And he gives the analogy of a king. All good analogies of Chassidus are from kings. So, right? So he gives the analogy of a king. There's different wars that a king will fight, right? A king will fight a war to gain more territory. Then throughout history, there's been kings who were provoked to fight a war just to win, to show the enemy, to put the enemy in the place. He says you find in history that those wars were the strongest wars. When a king has to prove that he's going to win, he's unstoppable. The middle of winning is unstoppable. And he says that when a king fights a war, He's prepared to put all resources, throw everything at this war. And the way the previous Rebbe writes, he says that he'll open up the deep treasures that have been stored up generations through his family. They were never used, no one's ever seen them. And no one ever uses them, and they're just there because they belong to him. And that's what and he'll only open them up and he'll give them and he'll squander them when there's a war to win. Says the Rebbe, same thing by us. The Yidden are called the army of Hashem. Because we live in a generation where our love of Hashem is at a lower level. We're not like the big tzaddikim, right? Our understanding, our consciousness, our depth is much lower than the previous generations. What do we have? We have midas hanetzach. We have the power to win. We are soldiers. We are soldiers who have to win the war, and that's the perspective we have to have. And that's what we have to think. Now, he says, when the king opens up the treasures, who does he give them to? Very interesting analogy. He says he gives them to the generals, but they're not for the generals. They're for the foot soldiers. For the foot soldiers to win the war. So too, Hashem gives us a mission. We have to finish the war. We have to bring Mashiach. We have to bring godliness into the world. We have to make a dir b'tachtoinah. It's a war which we have to fight. That's a strong war. It looks like an overwhelming war sometimes, right? We have to realize that we have it within us because we call Tzivas Hashem. We're the army of Hashem. Therefore, we have that midas hanetzach. We have that power of winning. Power of winning is very, very deep power, which means we have, and Hashem is prepared to squander all resources and to give us. But who those resources for? He gives them to the big tzaddikim to disseminate. But who they're for? They're for me and you. They're for the foot soldiers, for the simple yid, who's overcoming temptation, who's overcoming, the will not to do a mitzvah, the will not to serve Hashem, and it's hard and it's tough, and it's a tough world out there, and it's a tough environment, and he wants to win, and he knows that Hashem is providing him with the resources, spiritual resources, like the king who squanders all the treasures in order to really win this war, and that's how he wins. And in the Maimer of this year, which is based on chapter 15 of the previous Rebbe's Maimer, the Rebbe goes the whole thing because the previous Rebbe starts the conversation and the Rebbe elaborates a lot, and there's a whole Kabbalistic thing which talks about Or Ein Sof, the Zohar, the Arizal, I'm sorry. Or Ein Sof, the light of God, which is not for now to go into great detail, but the point is, I want to just mention it because it's this year's chapter where the Arizal says that the Or Ein Sof is so infinite that it's the mata adin tachlis, that Hashem's light can descend in an unstoppable way to the lowest levels. But it's also the maila adin ketz, it goes go higher and higher and higher. And he gives a whole explanation how the whole process of creating Hashem withdrew his light, and he made the light higher and higher until sort of the light lives with him, with his essence. And it's at that level of the light that has become so high that is the oitzer, that's the treasure that the previous Rebbe was talking about, that Hashem is willing to give us access to win this war. That's a very quick synopsis of this very long Maimer and some of the follow-up Mamorim of the Rebbe. But I thought we'd do that today just because it's before Yishvat. Next week in Ritz Hashem we'll go back to Tanya.
Thank you.
And have a good week.